Peace conference today here in Tel Aviv, and Ellie Hochenberg, our diplomatic correspondent for the news today, had the opportunity to sit down with Martin Indyk, who served as the U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian Negotiations while she was there. Here's the interview.
Mr. Indyk, thank you very much for being here with us.
My pleasure.
So just earlier this week, we've seen what the Israeli Premier Netanyahu described as the best meeting ever with the U.S. President Obama. But it seems that the main objective of this meeting was to try to keep the past in the past, or at least make it look like it. What's your input on this meeting?
I do think it was an effort by both leaders to turn the page. And I think that's very important because the U.S.-Israel relationship came under a great deal of strain. Because of the way that the Prime Minister decided to conduct his campaign against the President of the United States. It was unprecedented. It created a very awkward situation for democratic supporters of Israel and Jewish supporters of Israel, having to choose between their support for Israel and their support for their president. But let's hope that we can move on and that the United States and Israel can, as both leaders agreed to do, focus on the common threats that Israel and the United States face in a very difficult time in the Middle East.
Well, in this respect, many described the Netanyahu-Obama summit as a fence-mending meeting, but maybe more importantly, it was a fence-mending meeting between Netanyahu and the American Jewish community, which was, needless to say, very frustrated in the last couple of months from the occurrences over the Iran deal. Do you think there's a severe damage in the relations between the American Jewish community and Israel for the long run?
No, I think the American Jewish community will be very relieved by the message that Prime Minister Netanyahu brought, not just on the issues of his relationship with the President of the United States, with their president, but also on the message about the way in which Reform and conservative Jews, the vast majority of American Jews, are welcome as part of the community of Israel. So I think that too was a welcome message. But we'll have to see how things progress. There is a troubling trend amongst young Jewish people and amongst Democrats as well, that it is creating, I think, a real concern. Should be a concern for the government of Israel too, that they're losing support. The trend lines are moving in the wrong direction, and that does relate to the question of Israel's posture towards the Palestinians.
Yes, well, another important message by Netanyahu in his visit to Washington was his commitment to the two-state solution. But if we look at the current reality, we see a very hawkish right-wing government here in Israel. We see many problems within the Palestinians between Fatah and Hamas. And some U.S. advisors themselves said that the White House does not see any prospects for renewing the peace talks until 2017.
Right, but that doesn't mean that nothing can be done. Unfortunately, there's a government in Israel whose the majority, I think, of the members do not support a two-state solution. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I think in reality that's the case. So it's good that the Prime Minister is committed to it, but he's formed a government that can't follow through on it. And it does take two to tango. Yes, the Palestinians are engaged in terrible, horrendous acts of violence that should stop. It's unacceptable, and the incitement also needs to stop. But there are things that Israel can do as well to help in that process. I think that's what President Obama wanted to hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu. And there's a real problem on the ground here beyond the issue of Palestinian violence, terrorism and incitement. And that is that there is a process of creeping annexation of the sea areas of the West Bank, the 60% of the West Bank that Israel still holds. And it's fine to say, oh, there's a settlement freeze. There's no settlement freeze in terms of the construction that is going on. There's an announcement freeze, but there's massive construction going on. And there's demolition of Palestinian structures in the sea areas. And there's legalizing of illegal outposts, which is expanding the footprint of the settlements beyond the barrier. And all of that is creating a reality on the ground that really throws into question whether there is still a possibility of a two-state solution, as opposed to what begins to look like a one-and-a-half-state solution, which will never be acceptable to the Palestinians. So there are all sorts of things that could be done on the ground to reverse that process. And it doesn't take a cabinet decision to do it. It's within the hands of the defense minister. And I think that's what President Obama is looking to Prime Minister Netanyahu to do.
Do you think the White House, to a certain extent, has given up on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or its solution?
No, I don't think that at all that President Obama has given up because he believes very strongly that if you give up on trying to achieve a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you in effect condemn Israel to a future like its present, or worse, in which there is no hope for a separation between Israelis and Palestinians and a secure peace for Israel. So I don't think that he will give up. And certainly Secretary of State Kerry will not give up. But the question is, what can be done now? And I think the most important thing to be done now is to preserve the two-state solution, to reverse this process of creeping annexation, to find a way to bring Arab states who also want to see a resolution of this conflict into the process, but they'll only do it if they see that there's a government in Israel committed to it. And then the United States can help that process. There's an international community out there that wants to support that process. So there's a way of doing it from the ground up and from the outside in, and maybe that can change the circumstances in which eventually you can get back to negotiating.
And finally, if we're looking towards the future, the U.S. Elections, do you think the following administration, whether Republican or Democratic, will allow itself to keep the relations with Israel so shaky or doubtful?
Look, the U.S.-Israel relationship is strong. I worry about the longer-term trends, but it's strong. But the strength is based both on a security partnership, a strategic partnership, and a partnership in pursuing peace. The two go hand in hand. And it's very important that the people of Israel, in the first instance, and their government also be seen to be pursuing peace. To get caught trying, because that changes the environment. That's something the United States can get behind. But if it doesn't come from Israel, do not expect the United States to do it for you. We tried that. I tried that with Secretary of State Kerry. We gave it our best shot. We mobilized the U.S. government, the resources of the U.S. government, behind that effort. But our will alone was woefully inadequate in terms of getting the parties to an agreement. It has to come from both sides. And yes, there has to be a similar move on the Palestinian side, absolutely. But the failures and fecklessness of the Palestinians cannot be an excuse for Israel not to take actions on its own behalf in its own best interests. You say Abu Mazen is not a partner. He could become empowered as a partner tomorrow. Tomorrow, if you would freeze all settlement activity. But, you know, without some move on Israel's part, in the first instance, it doesn't get the credit for trying. And in the second instance, it does nothing to help try to build a partner on the Palestinian side. You can take your fate into your own hands. You do not have to be victims. You do not have to live by the sword alone. But it's in your hands.
Mr. Indyk, thank you very much for your insights and this interview for I24 News. Thank you.